Yeah, let's talk about the body then leaves in the ambulance with Jackie Kennedy and Clint Hill in that ambulance, and it arrives at Love Field. And
I'll tell you how I think how I think we should structure this part of it.
Okay.
I think the story starts with Lyndon Johnson leaving Parkland Hospital. Let's back up a little bit, because if you start with the story with Bobby, with the Jackie frame of reference, you get pulled into the we miss the preparation. So Lyndon Johnson. So now they finally have to say Kennedy's dead, which they finally say about 1:15. In fact, the LBJ Library document says 1:20, even though Malcolm Kilduff, the assistant press secretary,
had the press conference.
Unfortunately, who I also think is involved in this dirty affair, because Pierre Salinger, the president's loyal press secretary, was on the plane carrying all the Kennedy officials to Tokyo for the so-called economic conference. So Kilduff gets up there and says, well, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. They backdate it. And the reason, it's very important that they backdate it, by the way, because otherwise people are going to say, well, what the hell are you doing with the body? Well, if, he's so seriously shot in the head, what are you doing for 40 minutes? I mean, they don't want those questions. Anyway, they backdated it to 1 p.m. That's the announcement. The announcement is that Kilduff says at 1:35 that President Kennedy died at 1. In fact, when you look at the paperwork, Johnson is told at 1:15 or 1:20, Kennedy's dead. I mean, that's when they really have the event, and that's when they lose the opportunity. It's over. They can't do it at Parkland Hospital. So now Johnson goes to Kenny O'Donnell and says, I'm going back to Washington. And he leaves Kenny O'Donnell with the impression that he, Lyndon Johnson, is going to take Air Force 2 and leave promptly for Washington, D.C.
Both planes were in Dallas at the time.
Yeah, both planes parked wingtip to wingtip. And that was what he said he's going to do. That's not what he did. Lyndon Johnson got in the car, and so he starts using his siren. And Johnson says, cut the siren. Now, what I'm about to tell you comes from Captain Perdue Lawrence, who's now passed away, a loyal guy, clean as a whistle, who was driving one or two cars behind, and he drove the car with Lady Bird, I believe. Anyway, I interviewed him on camera in 1989. So he tells me what happened en route. So they cut the siren, but they're going too fast. So in one of those side streets, somebody just comes darting out and almost smashes into Johnson's car. So if that had happened and Johnson had been taken out of commission, the result of all this would have been that House Speaker McCormick would have become President of the United States. And Lee Harvey Oswald probably would have gone on with his life and gone to college and become the writer, which he wanted to be, which we'll get to that in a little while. Okay, so they get to the plane, and they run on board the plane, and Johnson immediately starts closing the windows on the plane and telling everybody, close the drapes, close the drapes. Now, I know all this because the Air Force people have been interviewed, and I know about what happened. And close the drapes, close the drapes. Now, by closing the drapes, you create a situation in which nobody inside the plane can see what's going on outside the plane.
Which was the idea.
Which was the idea. And nobody outside the plane can see what's going on inside the plane. And that's also the idea. So he's creating this isolated room in left field. So he's saying, close it. And he says, he makes it clear to the pilot, you are not to take off, that he makes it an act of chivalry. The reports read that President Johnson will not leave without the widow or the body. Let me tell you, he was much more concerned about the body than the widow. And he's not exactly a chivalrous person anyway. So that's what he does. So he's basically hiding on the aircraft. And they also take out seats at the back of the plane to make room for the coffin. Now, what I discovered much later is that more than 4 seats were taken out. They took out about 20 seats. Because they have to hide the body of the Secret Service agent. He's going to be turning out, that's that coffin at the front of the plane. And they get it on the plane. That's another story, but they turn it 90 degrees and put a tarpaulin over it, and that's called Lyndon's luggage.
And that's, when you say 90 degrees, it's actually upright?
It was upright when Chief Curry saw it.
It was upright.
Yeah, but then it's apparently rotated 90, and whether they took out about 20 seats in the passenger section of Air Force One. And that's why the passengers, some of them were resentful that why is Lyndon's luggage on our plane? I mean, but it's the body of the Secret Service. I mean, this gets very macabre. But well, let's focus on the tail compartment. Now, what you got to do is be able to get that body out of that coffin. And how are you going to do that? And I was prepared to show this yesterday at the lecture. I showed some of it. But it's really an amazing story. Here's the time elements, and we'll make a chart when we do this as a documentary film. The cream-colored hearse with the Kennedy coffin, Jackie Kennedy, arrives at Plainside. It leaves Parkland Hospital about 2:05. It arrives at Plainside at 2:14. this is an official Secret Service chronology. Someone's taking, you know. As a matter of fact, Lyndon Johnson, during this whole period, was telling Lady Bird, he says, "Bird, make notes."
Really?
I mean, you know, when the predecessor dies, you immediately say, "Make notes." It's very strange behavior. So she's making notes. Anyway, they have the times. So it's 2:14, and they got the body on the plane by 2:18. So what happens is that that Kellerman is a really big, strong guy. And
he's at the front of the casket.
Yeah, he's at the front of the casket. And Lyndon Johnson said of Kellerman, and this is on tape, he's more loyal a person can be found, but he's dumb as an ox.
Dumb as an ox.
Yeah, but actually he's strong as an ox. That's what's really in his mind.
Oh.
And he's lifting this coffin.
The front end.
Yeah, front end. And the other clique of agents are lifting it up, and they get onto the plane. Now, everybody knows from the Stoughton photographs that Jacqueline Kennedy, some minutes later, is given the green light to come on the plane.
So there's a delay there.
There's a small delay there. But here's where the interesting part is, and why I'm saying the body was immediately removed from that coffin within a minute. Because once she gets on the plane, she sits down next to the coffin. Now, we're going to skip a lot of events here. Then there's a swearing in. Let's flash forward to Andrews Air Force Base. When the body is taken off the plane, it goes into a Navy ambulance. This is on national TV. That is, the coffin goes off the plane. Navy ambulance, national TV, and the plane is landed at 6 o'clock. The Navy ambulance with Jackie and Bobby leave at 6:10 and arrive at Bethesda Naval Hospital at 6:55. Problem is, I meant the coffin inside the ambulance arrives at 6:55. Problem is, the body has arrived at 6:35. So somehow the body got out of the coffin. And when you back time it, it has to have occurred at Love Field.
At Love
There's
Field.
no other way for it to have happened. So what must have happened is that as soon as they got to the top of the ramp
With the casket.
with the casket was lifted, and the body was then taken out the starboard side of the plane and onto a forklift truck that had to be set up. They had to prepare for this. So Lyndon Johnson had 30 minutes or something from the time he got to the hospital at 1:40 or something, and his group to set up and to find a forklift and to get somebody to drive the forklift. And the pilot of Air Force 2 told me that he saw a forklift truck stretched up against the side of Air Force 1. So that's what they must have done. And we'll talk about the dramatic new evidence in a minute, that in fact it was on the forklift truck. But so they must have taken it out, and it's not in a body bag yet, so there's a blood problem, right?
So it's wrapped in a sheet.
It's wrapped in the sheets.
As
from
it left
Parkland.
Parkland
As
Hospital.
it left Parkland. And they got to get him out the starboard door, which is a half door used by the galley to put the food on the plane. So they had to have somebody on the forklift truck to drag him across the pallet of the forklift truck. And you had to have somebody inside the plane to push him out. And then they had to lower him and drive the forklift around the wing and over to the forward luggage area to put him in the forward luggage area, which I believe that's where he was based on other evidence. It's all now we get into the world of the blood evidence. Okay. Now
So let me just
okay, sure.
clarify a couple things. So they get the body out of the casket, while Jackie Kennedy and the Kennedy loyalists are still on the tarmac or at the base of the steps. So they do that quickly.
And those photographs of Stoughton show them all down on the tarmac, gazing up as the coffin is brought up.
Right.
Yes.
And so the Kennedy loyalists are still down on the tarmac.
On the tarmac.
As they get this body towards the galley.
The coffin towards, excuse me, they're on the tarmac, I'm sorry, then they get the coffin onto the plane, and then they're still on the tarmac when they raise the lid on the coffin and get the body out of there and out the starboard door onto the forklift truck.
Okay. Now I'm guessing that the timing is really important because the Kennedy party can't see that body wrapped in a sheet on the forklift truck as it's moving. So they must go up the steps and into the plane as that forklift truck is moving the body to luggage. Is that the right scenario?
Yes and no. It was Sean Fetter's contribution, and I give him full credit. This is in the last month or two. He's the one that figured out if you keep the forklift truck in a raised position,
you don't have
that problem.
I got you.
So basically, they got him onto the fork, but with something more important about the forklift we'll get to in a business, and that's the back of the Kennedy's body and the deep abrasions and the scars on it, which we'll get to in a minute. But they put him on the forklift. Now there's a blood problem created. And the blood problem is, first of all, Kellerman turns out to have a blood-soaked shirt from the neck down, and he's riding back in the cockpit on a jump seat. And Sean Fetter discovered that when he interviewed Swede Hansen, the co-pilot of Air Force One. Dr. Berkeley had blood on his sleeves. He somehow got involved in this thing. And I discovered that in the New York Times that weekend. Berkeley filed a report the next week that the reason he had blood on his sleeves was that he had reached into a garbage can at Parkland Hospital to get out a rose as a memento for Mrs. Kennedy. Okay.
Wow.
Okay, now there's a blood problem, I think, with Lyndon Johnson because he had been, I should say this, Sean found the reports that Lyndon Johnson was at the back of the airplane when the body comes on, and he actually had hands on the coffin. We have no witness to say he raised the coffin, but he's the hands on. Nobody knows that Lyndon Johnson was hands on Kennedy's coffin, but it's in an Air Force document or a publication, and there's witnesses that he's quote unquote supervising. Well, later we learn out that Johnson ran into the bathroom of the Kennedy bedroom at the back of the plane, and he's hiding in there. And when the Kennedys get on board the plane, they don't know that Johnson's on their plane, and there's this delay. And Godfrey McHugh, the Air Force aide, says, "Why aren't we taking off?" And then the pilot says, "Well, I've been given orders not to take off." And McHugh is really upset. He's going back and forth in the front of the plane to the back. "What do you mean orders?" He says, "Well, Johnson's on this plane." He says, "No, he isn't. He's on his own airplane." And he says, "No, you tell me that 6-footer isn't Johnson." So McHugh and Kenny O'Donnell start looking for Johnson on Air Force One, and they can't find him. They finally figure out he must be in the president's bedroom, and he's not in there. So the only place left was the bathroom. And they open the door, and Johnson's hiding behind a sheet or something, or a curtain. And Johnson yells at him, "Get out of here, get out of here, close the door. The Secret Service told me to hide in here. There's a worldwide conspiracy." That's in Godfrey McHugh's report to the House Select Committee, but he said it on a Canadian radio interview, appropriately titled in 1976, "Thou Shalt Not Kill." This radio interview is this great exclusive interview, and I heard the interview, and it was sent to me by somebody. Anyway, that's what happened, and that's what McHugh says happened at the back of the plane. Now, what's important is that when Johnson emerged from the bathroom, he had a changed shirt. And Larry O'Brien notes in his memoir that he noticed that at the swearing-in, suddenly Johnson's wearing a changed shirt. So my joke was that maybe the Secret Service told him, "Listen, there's a worldwide conspiracy. We want you to go to the bathroom and change your shirt." Anyway, so that's what happened with Lyndon Johnson.
Okay.
So there's the problem with Lyndon Johnson and his shirt. There's the problem with Berkeley and his sleeves. There's the problem of Kellerman with the blood. But there's another problem. There's blood in the galley area. This is my discovery that, the body goes on, the coffin goes on the plane at 2:18. And if I'm correct, they got the body off the plane within minutes, because then Jackie came up and they all sat down next to a coffin, which unbeknownst to them was empty. Okay. Well, the judge arrives at 2:30 and the swearing in is at 2:38. We'll make a nice chart of this to show when we make a movie of this. Well, sometime before the swearing in at 2:38, Lyndon Johnson and Al Thomas, the Texas congressman who got Kennedy to make this trip and who Johnson winks at, during the swearing in.
Congressman winks at Johnson.
Yeah, Congressman winks at Johnson. They suddenly say they want vegetable soup. So now they want the galley open, and we want vegetable soup. And then
Before the swearing in.
Yeah, before the swearing in, they want vegetable soup, and then they want doubles in vegetable soup. And so this is, and a researcher I told this to about a year ago, her name is Todd Vaughan. Todd says to me, "Are you sure they wanted vegetable soup before the swearing in?" I said, "Yes, it's in the notes of Marie Famer, Johnson's secretary." So I think what happened is that the way they covered the blood problem
in the galley
was to open a lot of vegetable soup and say some vegetable soup spilled or something, tomato-based vegetable soup.
So they must have felt that the blood trail in the galley was noticeable.
Yeah,
they were concerned about it.
I think they were concerned about it, and the most damning evidence about that occurs back at Andrews Air Force Base. Now, in Andrews Air Force Base, and maybe we just cut to that right now, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. Normally, when the Air Force One returns, the plane is immediately refilled, immediately refueled, because you always have to have Air Force One ready to go, especially on the day of the Kennedy assassination, when there's all this talk about, the Russians being involved in a nuclear war, and all this stuff at the top of the government. So one of the people that Sean Fetter found was a fuel truck driver. And I'm trying to remember his name, Jimmy, I don't remember his name at this moment. And the fuel truck driver said that they didn't refuel the Air Force One. It said he's in his fuel truck with all the jet fuel, and he's told to stay in the truck. And after Johnson, and the TV stops, and Johnson has made his little speech by Air Force One, "This is a sad time for all people. We have suffered a loss that cannot be weighed. I ask for your help and God's," and he gets on his helicopter and goes to the White House. This fellow, John Wetherill is his name, John Wetherill. He tells the story of that. He's sitting in his truck, and Air Force One is pulled into this hangar. And it's pulled all the way in, and only the tail sticks out, and the doors are closed. and he's told to stay in the truck. So an hour goes by, 2 hours goes by. He's in the truck all the way till the next morning.
Really?
Plane
In the
was
truck?
Yes, the plane was never refueled.
Oh.
He said he got out of the truck to go over and find out what's going on, and there's this big cleanup going on of Air Force One in this hangar. So the cleanup of Air Force One went on. He said, according to his information, AF-1 wasn't refueled until 3 o'clock on Saturday. Excuse me.
Morning or afternoon?
Saturday afternoon,
Okay.
on November 23rd.
Okay.
So then this was so important that I arranged to go to Dallas, and I interviewed Jon on camera. We got the whole story on camera. So Air Force One, the cleanup of Air Force One at Andrews Air Force Base.
And when you say cleanup, you're not talking about cups and things.
No.
You're tell what's the
what
cleanup
I
that's being
assumed
done?
cleanup. What I assumed that what Jon was talking about was cleanup. We're talking about hoses and cleanup equipment.
And they were cleaning.
And they were cleaning AF-1, Air Force One.
They were cleaning the blood.
Well, I think he didn't get inside the hangar to know that much, but he said it was all very hush-hush, he said, and they were doing some kind of a plane cleaning. So I think that means that there was a problem. They just weren't tidying up. And cups and, coffee cups. I think we're talking about a cleanup having to do with the fact that there was a mess, not only in the galley, but in the forward luggage area where they
The
brought the
president's
body.
was.